This is the 7.1 through 7.2 practice quiz video answer key. So I'll go over a lot of these just to kind of help out with knowing what's going on within this practice quiz. Again, I'm not sure what the actual quiz is going to look like while I'm recording this video answer key, but this is going to give you practice for a lot of the skills, which I think are very, very important, especially the ones that are going to come into play in AP Calc a lot. So secant inverse of 2 over square root of 3. Here, I don't know what this looks like. I actually am going to rationalize this, so I'm going to say that I want to figure out 2 over square root 3. I'm going to multiply both sides by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3, and I'm going to end up with 2 times the square root of 3 over 3. So now I'm talking about the secant inverse of whichever one has a secant value of 2 root 3 over 3. Well, the angle that has this secant value between 0 and pi is pi over 6. So my answer here is pi over 6. I went through the process of rationalizing it. Again, all of these are going to be unit circle angles on this first one when I'm saying find the exact value of each expression. So this is something that can be done without a calculator. And I know that this is going to be my angle pi over 6 based on that. Over here, when I do the sine inverse of negative root 2 over 2, this is negative pi over 4 because that's the unit circle angle with that sign. That one's pretty straightforward. It falls within that range of negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. This one, what is the inverse sine of the sine of 11 pi over 5? I'm going to go ahead and draw out what 11 pi over 5 is. 11 pi over 5 is just 1 pi over 5 past 2 pi. So it falls right here. So this is what 11 pi over 5 is. This is a quadrant 1 angle, so that means my sine is positive. And plus it is just pi over 5 past that. And this works really, really well with our period that I can just go ahead and say that my answer here is pi over 5. I take the sine of 11 pi over 5. It gives me whatever y value is here. I know that when I take the inverse sine of that y value, it's going to be equal to the positive rotation there, so that's pi over 5 in that case. Tangent of the tangent inverse of 7 over 3. This one is in all real numbers, so I can just say that that answer is 7 over 3. That one's very straightforward. What is the cotangent of the inverse cosecant of root 10? So here I know that my hypotenuse is going to be equal. I can rewrite my cosecant. I've got some cosecant of theta equal to root 10 over 1. So I've got a hypotenuse which is equal to root 10. I've got an opposite side which is equal to 1. I'm quickly going to do some fast math in my head to say my adjacent side is 3 because square root of 10 squared is equal to 1 squared plus a squared. We're going to be able to figure out that that's 3 really quickly. So now that I know my opposite and my adjacent, I'm going to be able to say that my cotangent of theta is equal to 3 over 1. So my cotangent of theta is equal to 3. This one, my secant of my cosine inverse, you'll see on my written answer key that I go into a lot of detail here. I could just realize that a secant is the inverse of a cosine. This cosine is falling between 0 and 1. I can just flip this around and call this 4 over 3. I went through a lot of the work in the written answer key, but I can notice that the secant is just the inverse of the cosine and make my life a lot easier there. Sine of the sine inverse of negative root 3 over 2. Well, I'm talking about the sine of negative pi over 3 because that's the angle which falls. Also, since this is between 0 and 1, I could have just jumped straight to the fact that this is negative root 3 over 2 because I'm still taking the sine of that exact same angle. When I do the tangent of the inverse cotangent of negative root 3, this one is a little bit more complicated in the fact that this falls in quadrant 2. So this is where that cotangent angle would have to fall. When I'm looking at the angle that has a cotangent of root 3, I'm talking about my pi over 6 value. So this is 5 pi over 6. And then I want the tangent of 5 pi over 6. Well, this is going to be negative root 3 over 3. And that's my final answer. It's still going to be negative. Works out fairly well for me. I'm very happy with that answer. Using the calculator here, I've already explained this. This does not need to go in a ton of detail. Make sure with this inverse secant that you're doing the reciprocal of this. So you could even plug this into your calculator as just the inverse cosine of 1 divided by 1.4. And that would still give you that answer in radians, etc. Just like over here, if I did the sine inverse, that one's already straightforward. So we already know the sine inverse there. But when I have to do this inverse secant, make sure that I do my inverse cosine and do the reciprocal. I can just put 1.4 under 1, and that does all the work for me. My tangent inverse, that one's very straightforward. Cotangent, I mark in the notes that this one's positive, so I can just do my inverse tangent. So this would become the inverse tangent of 1/5. Now remember, if this is negative, I'll have to do the cosine one, but you can always look at the video notes on the actual quiz when we get there. So that's how we would do all the things in this practice quiz. I might expand the quiz a little bit more, and it's going to look a little bit different, and we'll see how that looks next week, but I want to make sure that you have this resource to practice more. Any questions, reach out sooner rather than later.